Hi, boys and girls. We're going to be finishing the last two chapters of Flat Stanley's Worldwide Adventures, The Great Egyptian Grave Robbery. We're on Chapter 8, The Hieroglyph. Sir Hawara's crew rushed into the pharaoh's tomb, nearly knocking Stanley over in its excitement. From the passageway, Stanley could hear them exclaim over the treasures. Sir Hawara ordered them to start stripping the tomb. "If it's gold, take all you can hold," he chortled. "Take everything you can carry. This guy's been dead for 4,000 years. He won't miss any of it. Follow the hieroglyphs and start loading the plane." It was time. Excuse me. Stanley extinguished his torch and covered himself all over with the soot. He whispered Sir Hawara's chilling words to himself. "We're just going to leave him to rot for eternity with the mummies." He felt himself break out into goose discs. Because remember, he can't have goosebumps, so he only has goose discs. Then he leaped up to the wall and froze there, stuck. Sir Hawara's crew ran out of the tomb, loaded with treasures. Sir Hawara shone his flashlight along the walls of the passageway. His beam fell upon Stanley. "There's one," he called. "Funny looking thing, but it's just like the flat kid said. It's pointing that way. Come on!" He and his men rushed off. So what did Stanley do? He tried to make himself look like a hieroglyph. They ran in the wrong direction. Stanley slipped down from the wall and made his way to the exit. As he stepped outside, he was delighted to see Amisi and her father waiting. "We've brought the police just as you asked," Amisi said. "But what's this all about?" "Go on in," Stanley directed the police officers. "I think you'll find this pyramid is loaded with looting looters loaded with loot." And that is exactly what they did find. After a few moments, the officers began to come out of the pyramid with Sir Hawara and his henchmen. Take a look. They're all trying to steal all these amazing pieces of history and all the stolen artifacts. "Caught red-handed at last," Amisi and her father cried. So there he is, and Sir Hawara looks mad. Stanley was especially happy to see Sir Hawara in handcuffs. There would be no more hand clapping from him for a while. Soon there was a big crowd around Stanley. So smart, so brave, so flat. People marveled when they found out the story. In the middle of the commotion, Amisi gave Stanley a hug. "I was wrong when I said I was wrong about you," she said. Stanley felt himself blush bright red. He wondered how he hadn't noticed it before. Amisi was very pretty. Ooh. Amisi's father came over and took a picture of the two of them with his instant camera. He gave the picture to Stanley, "So you'll always remember your visit." Then he shook Stanley's hand. "You've captured Egypt's worst looter and saved the priceless giant scrolls of papyrus. Egypt's debt to you is enormous. How can we ever repay? Say the word, whatever reward you'd like is yours." Before Stanley could answer, the little celebration was disturbed by a group of tourists. They were laughing and pointing at Stanley's camel. "Look at the shape of that animal, Marge. Absolutely ridiculous." Stanley knew too well how it felt to be poked fun of because of someone's shape. "Hey," he called back, "we don't get to choose what we look like." Stanley could almost hear his mother's voice. "Hay is for horses, not people," she would remind him if she were here right now. She was always one for using proper language. Or, if she really were here in Egypt, she would probably say hay is for camels. She was also always one to appreciate her surroundings. Stanley suddenly missed his family again, even more than the night before. "Could you please just mail me back to America?" he asked. "Certainly," Amisi's father replied. "Let's go inside and get you wrapped up now." The words made Stanley remember something. "Just one more thing," he said. And then he asked Amisi and her father for a favor. That was the end of Chapter 8. So, Chapter 9 is called A Package for Arthur. Back at the Lamb Chop residence, George Lamb Chop arrived home from work early. "The office is being repainted," he explained to his wife. "Just as well. I wasn't getting much done. I kept wondering how Stanley is doing." He picked up the mail in the hall. "Say, Harriet," he cried, "there's a large package here from Egypt. Do you think?" So there they are. "Yes, I know," Mrs. Lamb Chop said. "For a moment I was so excited. I thought our dear boy was back. But it's addressed to Arthur, not us." I think Stanley has sent a souvenir home early. I imagine you're right, Mr. Lambchop said, disappointed. Besides, the package is just lying there quietly. That couldn't be Stanley. Just then, Arthur came home from school. Mr. Lambchop noticed he looked very glum. How about a game of Monopoly, Mr. Lambchop offered, or a walk in the park to watch the sailboats? Arthur shook his head. It wouldn't be the same without Stanley here. Nothing's the same without Stanley here, he sighed. Well, this might cheer you up. Mr. Lambchop handed Arthur the package. Take a look. He and Mrs. Lambchop watched as their son opened it. All three of them cried out in shock as a mummy sprang up from the package. The mummy began reeling stiff-legged around the room. Mrs. Lambchop almost fainted. Mr. Lambchop prepared himself to protect whomever might need protecting. Arthur stared with his mouth hanging open, and then he started to laugh. This mummy is a little bit flat. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop stepped closer to look for themselves. It was true. Even under all the wrappings, it was clear there was something oddly shaped about this mummy. Start unwrapping at once, called Mr. Lambchop. And so they did. Finally, after unwinding what seemed like miles of linen strips, there stood their own dear boy, Stanley. What a surprise. There was great rejoicing and many hearty congratulations on Stanley's clever trick. Everyone talked at once. We'll remember that for a long time. Ho, ho, and to think you were right under our noses all afternoon. How did you ever manage to stay so still? Then Mrs. Lambchop remembered she had dinner cooking. Come to the table while it's still hot, please. Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, being careful not to talk with his mouth full, Stanley told him about his adventure. At the part about Sir Hawara's plan to leave Stanley in the tomb, Mrs. Lambchop turned quite pale. She held her husband's hand for strength. But otherwise, everyone was quite delighted with the story. Many, many times they exclaimed how clever and how brave Stanley had been. After the apple crisp was finished, seconds all around, Mrs. Lambchop decided the family had enough excitement for one day. Time for bed. Stanley was very happy to see his old bedroom with his spaceship lamp and his striped pajamas neatly folded on top of his soft pillow, just as he had left it. It's good to be back, he told Arthur. Then he remembered the photograph Amisi's father had taken. He pinned it up on his bulletin board. That's Amisi, Stanley told his brother. What do you think of her? Arthur looked at the photograph puzzled. I think she's a girl. Stanley got into bed and turned out the light. That's what I think too, Arthur, he said. He smiled in the dark. The end. So that was the end of Flat Stanley's Worldwide Adventures, book number 2, The Great Egyptian Grave Robbery. So thankfully, Flat Stanley came to the rescue again. Very, very exciting. Remember that each time that they write one of these Flat Stanley Worldwide Adventures, they tell us about some facts, and it says here in the back, what you need to know to be an Egyptologist. Egypt is in Africa, and its capital, Cairo, is the biggest city on the whole continent of Africa. The Nile River, which runs through Egypt, might be the longest river in the world. It depends how you measure. Some people think the Amazon is a little bit longer. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world that is still standing. It's built from more than 2 million blocks that each weigh as much as a pickup truck. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics writing includes about 800 symbols. And keep in mind, our English alphabet only has 26. Ancient Egyptians mummified important people after they died by wrapping them in pieces of cloth, which we also call linen. The oldest known mummy is more than 5,000 years old. Much of Egypt is covered by the Sahara Desert, which is the biggest sandy desert on Earth. So I hope you enjoyed that, boys and girls. That was really interesting because if you make a connection to earlier in the year when we did talk about the different parts that we learned about ancient Egypt, so we talked about some of the hieroglyphics, we talked about some of the desert. Remember when we talked about desert habitats, right? We talked about those. And then keep in mind, we also talked about how some of those pyramids were built before the times of trucks and excavators and all those kind of things. So pretty amazing they were able to build them all. So I hope you made a connection to our learning earlier in the year by listening to this. I want to let you know that I'm going to be taking a break from reading for 1 week. So this will be our last story for 1 week because I'm going to be away camping where there is no cell reception. So I'm not able to upload any stories. So I hope that you enjoy your week, and I promise I will be back in a week and I will get to see you then. I hope that you have a good week. I miss you all very much. Take care. Bye-bye.